Welcome on in. This is the RotoWire Fantasy Football. Today, we are getting into some ADP toss-ups, some tough decisions facing drafters as draft season heats up, especially in best ball and in redraft as well. We're kind of putting our feet to the fire here. We're going to be looking at some of the high-end players that we got to pick between in our roster builds. Let's go ahead, start the show. Welcome on in. This is the RotoWire Fantasy Football podcast, not just the RotoWire Fantasy Football, as I very smoothly opened the show with just a moment ago. I'm your host, John McKechnie. That is Mario Puig. Mario, as we've been doing since training camp opened up, we've been kind of unpacking some of the things that have caught our eye from the Twitter sphere as it pertains to training camp news and notes and storylines, things of that nature. We're going to go a little bit more on the positive end this week. Instead of shooting down some hype beast type stuff, let's look at some potential late round sleepers that may or may not be making some noise. I want to kick it off with a guy that wasn't super on our draft radar, but has seemingly made a pretty strong impression down in the Crescent City. Mason Tipton, do you care to educate the people?
Well, I'm kind of catching up on myself. I was not aware of him until the Saints training camp reports started coming in, and so that's to say I did not know who Tipton was at any point in the pre-draft or after-draft process until then. So the same thing happened with Rashid Shaheed in his rookie year, however. Like, he was not on my radar at all out of what was it, Weber State or something, where he put up kind of okay numbers, but he kept getting hurt at these really inopportune times, and so it was difficult to get a read from his stats how good Shaheed might have been. And similarly, or not fully similarly, in that Mason Tipton's got just straight up better numbers at Yale than the Rashid Shaheed did at Weber State. But it's difficult to tell if Tipton maybe had a few injuries limiting his numbers a little bit, but when you glance at his numbers at Yale, that they're quite good, and his workout metrics, his athletic metrics were really great at the Yale Pro Day. So Tipton at 5'10", 182 was credited with a 4.34 Pro Day 40. So admittedly, that might be like a 4.4 flat at the combine. Might not be, but given his production and given the athletic testing, by the way, Rashid Shaheed, we didn't even have a 40 time. It might have been something like a low 4.4. Based on some of his high school track numbers. But Tipton running a sub 4.4 would put him in a pretty good prospect category, I think, in terms of, production and then tool set grade. And every once in a while, extreme long shots like Shaheed do pop up and sort of come out of nowhere. So when you're as fast as Tipton is, when you produced sufficiently acceptably at the Yale level of competition, and like you said, you're getting really great reviews in training camp from pretty much everybody watching. It's not so much like a player you want to consider in the latest rounds unless you're in a dynasty startup or drafting just in a really deep format for some reason. But a guy like Tipton, like a guy like Shaheed, could all of a sudden be a fab curiosity in October or something.
So is that basically what his best case scenario ends up looking like, and how does it work for best ball? Because like you said, like that there's a higher likelihood that maybe he's not on the mainstream fantasy radar until we're well into the season. Obviously in best ball there's no in-season pickups. Do you feel comfortable making that speculative like last round pick? I feel like I have a couple shares on DraftKings, but in the 18 rounder on Underdog, I'm a little bit less certain that I will go that route.
Right. How many rounds is DraftKings?
I believe it's 20.
Okay, so 20, that would still be pushing it a little bit for me, but I actually, I'm doing a 32 round thing on NFFC's best ball tournament format, and then there, I might need to think about a guy like Tipton, because we're really going to be into the weeds, even with drafting kickers and defenses. So I don't want to pick a guy like Tipton, though, in any other best ball format, because we just don't know what we're going to get from him. It's more like keep a guy like him on your fab speed dial, or if you're in a huge format, by all means, if you're in that tier of the ADP, a guy like Tipton stands out from a lot of those other players around him who have just no chance of producing in the NFL. So yeah, basic deal with a guy like Tipton is he's a fringe prospect, but he has a lot going for him as far as fringe prospects go. And more so, in my opinion, in the meantime, a fab and dynasty, flyer curiosity rather than someone that you'd want to put in the first 20 rounds.
All right. Good.
He should have been at the combine though. Like what the guy ran a sub 4.4, put up totally good numbers at Yale. They have just bum receivers at the combine every single year. It's ridiculous that he wasn't there.
They really do. So, give the Ivy League guy a shot. Let's move on over to a couple of running backs that are of note at this stage. So in Los Angeles, specifically in the Chargers backfield, there's a lot of question marks. I think we've determined that, and we've said our piece about the main three guys between Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins coming over from Baltimore, Kamani Vidal coming in, as a 6th-round pick out of Troy, but probably shouldn't have gone that late in the draft. But Jaret Patterson seems to be catching the eye of the coaching staff in certain ways. Do you find that maybe it's a little bit concerning for someone that's drafting Vidal? I mean, I have a lot of Vidal, so I honestly want to know the answer to this one. With Patterson kind of having that similar profile to Vidal, and you can draw these parallels several different ways. Smaller school guy, kind of a short squat build that took on massive workloads during his college time. But Patterson been in the league for a while, but hasn't really made an impact on Sundays just yet. But is this the year that it happens, or is this something where, ultimately Vidal is going to, beat him out on the depth chart?
Yeah, this is a tough one for me because I love both players actually, and I still believe in Vidal either way. But as someone who had the truth of position the whole time that Patterson was better than guys like Brian Robinson on the Washington depth chart and whatever, I don't remember if McKissick was still there 2 years ago. But to me, it was always like Washington screwed up not putting Patterson on the field. It was discouraging that Patterson didn't get a shot there. And even now he remains a long shot to do much at the NFL level at whatever capacity. But I believe in him because he ran for just crazy numbers at Buffalo. And while his athletic testing wasn't good, Patterson is no worse of an athlete than someone like Devin Singletary. So he probably should be thought of, in my opinion, as someone who can be Devin Singletary, only maybe a little better and passing down work. So at 5'7", 190 or whatever Patterson is, he's not going to be a workhorse, but he's shown passing down ability and he's knows how to run with the football. So he's different from Vidal all the same in that while Vidal is a smaller running back, 5'8", 213 is a big difference from 5'7", 195, especially when Vidal's running a 4.46 combine 40, whereas Patterson's more like a 4.6 guy who's quick and, starts and stops really well. But particularly with the durability concerns with Edwards and Dobbins, and given how much the Chargers probably want to put the ball in the running back's hands this year, I really think you might see both Patterson and Vidal playing at some point, and maybe at the same time. Maybe it would be like 35 snaps Vidal, 25 for Patterson. But it looks like right now, if there's only that 20-25 snaps, the Chargers actually prefer Patterson right now. And it might be more like maybe Patterson can never start. Maybe Vidal would need to be the guy ahead of him on the starting depth chart. But for the role-playing depth chart, it seems like Patterson might be ahead of him. And I think that one has some legs.
And with that in mind, what's your drafting interest? Is this enough to put him on your best ball radar, or is this more like your deeper formats, your dynasty type of like supplemental drafts?
It's still deeper formats than in Tipton's case, but I am more interested in Patterson in 2024 than I am in Tipton in 2024. Tipton has the shot to be the Rashid Shaheed of this year, but Patterson, not like a Kyron Williams level upside. I don't think the Chargers would put that much work on him. But what would be Jaylen Warren? Maybe, I don't know, some kind of, he was undrafted. He was kind of out of nowhere, but if you look closely in his career, he was always pretty good. There's no reason he should have failed. And all it'll take is an injury to one of Edwards or Dobbins for Patterson to get a real look. And I think a team that'll still be productive, competitive. I'm not a doom and gloom person on the Chargers, although admittedly it would be nice if they stopped getting hurt.
Yes, it would, but they just seem to be permanently snake bit in that regard. Would a Jaleel McLaughlin-esque season be a decent comparison potentially, or is that asking?
It could be. I will say, even as a bit of a McLaughlin critic, he is a step or two faster than Patterson. Patterson has to be like the Devin Singletary kind of exception, where it's like he runs a 4.6, but he just charges ahead really well. Probably similar level quickness. I would say Patterson's probably a better pure runner and probably better in blitz pickup than Jaleel McLaughlin, but McLaughlin probably has him beat as a pass catcher and as a speed threat. It's just, I don't know what there are other trade-offs to consider there. Like Patterson might be able to take on more volume, especially as a runner. Patterson might be able to do more power concepts than McLaughlin. So I think there is, especially in the 32 round format, like on NFFC best ball, Patterson is, I mean, I kind of hope I hope I draft him in that one. I don't even really need to put too many conditions on that. I might at some point need to think about that 18th round on underdog, but probably not much earlier than that. And so, yeah, more dynasty, more deep league format, but I do think Patterson could be pretty important in those kinds of formats this year.
It does warm my heart that Jaret Patterson might ultimately get a shot. He was, as the former college football guy here at RotoWire, like,
he was crazy.
There is nothing more fun than a Maction slate and just locking in Jaret Patterson and just watching 200 yards roll in like clockwork. It was those were the days. I'd love to see him get a shot to show what he's got on Sundays. And then rounding it out, obviously one of the big stories this week is Christian McCaffrey tweaking his calf. I don't think that it necessarily impacts his week one availability, but it does remind everyone that there is the fact that Christian McCaffrey is mortal. There have been seasons in his career where he's missed time, so maybe we do need to take a sharper look at the depth behind him. And I think Elijah Mitchell profiles it as the next guy up theoretically, but beyond that, is there someone else in this San Francisco backfield that might have a shot here?
Yeah, not Matt Breida. Pretty much everybody else though. So it's, McCaffrey obviously is great. Mitchell, I think, is the clear running back 2 when healthy, but he's got a hamstring thing of his own. And this is, of course, on the heels of all those knee problems that he's had the last 2 years. So Mitchell never really got hurt at Lafayette that I can remember, but now we're going on basically 3 years in a row. And it's kind of concerning that these recurring injuries are occurring in similar areas. And you can imagine compensation being a factor from one to the other. So I do think Mitchell definitely gets the first shot if he's upright. Like, there's just no question to me that he will be the running back 2, but he's been on the shelf so much. And even with Isaac Guerrero, the 4th rounder, he's on the shelf with a hamstring thing. He missed about almost 2 whole seasons at Wisconsin because of hamstring stuff. So he's on a week-to-week basis with this hamstring thing now. It's Jordan Mason who's the only one that hasn't been getting hurt and hasn't been having these lower leg injuries, extremely knock on wood. But Mason is a totally decent player, in my opinion. I mean, he's been really productive, 5.6 yards per carry over something like 82 carries in the NFL, 4 touchdowns. So he has been automatic every time he's gotten a chance. I wouldn't be terribly shocked if he turns out to be something like the next Gus Edwards, where different reasons for their undrafted status. Jordan Mason, I think, basically had some bad luck with injuries and Jahmyr Gibbs showing up, because he was considered almost like an NFL mainstream prospect after his freshman year at Georgia Tech. He just didn't have numbers as good the subsequent years. But Mason's a rugged guy, and he's out of those 3, Guerrero, Mitchell, and McCaffrey, Mason's the one who's best built to take those really grinding carries. And it wouldn't be shocked, especially if 2 of those other guys are on the shelf at any given time, Mason could just show up. So as far as best ball goes, though, it's still pretty deep format, still pretty risky. I can't tell anyone that they're wrong to consider it in a tournament format, though, because if Mason gets 4 starts for the 49ers and you have him in the last round, that could be a big deal, especially if it's late in the year. But ideally, he's more like a guy you spam the bench with in NFFC big bench kind of thing. Like, keep a guy like that on your bench instead of some crap backup quarterback or whatever, because granted, it takes a lot of things to fall a certain way, but if they do, you have a winning lottery ticket right there.
No, exactly. So bear that in mind. And I think that's a good refresher on Jordan Mason, because, begrudgingly, I did think that he was a very solid prospect during his time at Georgia Tech, and he's done well when given the chance in the NFL. Before we get over to some ADP toss-ups, we got a message from our friends over at Circa. The biggest pro football contests in Vegas are back. Circa Survivor and Circa Million are now up to $16 million in guaranteed prizes. 2 ways to win and no rake. Circa Survivor contestants select one team each week with no point spread. Last the longest to win it all with $10 million guaranteed. And in Circa Million, make 5 picks against the spread each week for your share of $6 million guaranteed quarterly and full season payouts for that Circa Million. Enter in Nevada, play from anywhere. Visit circasports.com for details. All right, and we also have a message from our friends over at Blue Wire. All right, let's get some ADP toss-ups. Let's kick things off in the earlier rounds with a tough wide receiver toss-up. We got Chris Olave, ADP and underdog at 18.8, and Jaylen Waddle at 19.9. Who are you picking between these two?
Generally, I prefer Waddle, acknowledging that there's some maybe more risk with Waddle than in Olave's case, because I think Olave is always going to be a central part of the Saints game plan. I think Olave is an elite receiver, so I have no concerns there. But I do have concerns about the I have concerns about the Derek Carr's quarterback play. I have concerns about Dennis Allen keeping the team together. There's a lot of stuff that can go wrong there in ways that I don't really feel like testing my luck over in the second round. But Waddle seems to be hurt pretty much all the time. Even when he's having big games, he seems to be limping after the big play after big play that he posts. He never seems to be feeling that well. Maybe that's just kind of his aesthetic. I don't know. Maybe there's really an actual durability concern there that's worth thinking about more. But
Ohio State guys are just weak.
Ohio State guys?
Yeah.
Oh, this is a.
I'm just bagging on the Buckeyes. Go on.
Oh well, I was saying Jaylen Waddle misses all that. Is the one who's hurt all that time. So I couldn't tell if you were taking I couldn't tell if you were ironically applying an Alabama thing to an Ohio State. Ironically, anyway. So Waddle seems to be hurt all the time, but he on a per snap basis has been super productive, and I just think, particularly if Tyreek Hill were to miss time, Jaylen Waddle could just turn into a top 5 receiver instantly. Whereas there's no way that can happen with Olave on the Saints. It doesn't matter how many other pass catchers you remove. You can't make Derek Carr do that. In my opinion, at least, you can't make Derek Carr do that without somebody like Mike McDaniel level caliber coaching. And I'm not convinced this Kubiak kid is that good, especially when he's working underneath Dennis Allen. So we'll see. I love Olave, but I hate Derek Carr in that team.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I've noticed that you've kind of drawn some parallels potentially between this Saints team and last year's Raiders team. I mean, Dennis Allen, I'm surprised that they ultimately retained him for this season after the way that last year went, and his entire tenure, frankly. But here we are. Tresner, our guy in the comments, brings up
Trent Reznor, I think our fan. So
he brings up that Olave the easy pick between the two, just because he profiles as a wide receiver 1, whereas Waddle is going to be stuck behind Hill. But the Miami offense and what has more value ultimately, the wide receiver 2 in Miami or the wide receiver 1 in New Orleans? And
it's fair point. Yeah, it's just, and I think in redraft there's a point to be made that Chris Olave might be more consistent than Jaylen Waddle, and so maybe less likely to give you like a 6-point fantasy week than Jaylen Waddle. It's just, again, like on a per snap basis, wide receiver 2 or not, Jaylen Waddle rakes like crazy. So if Waddle's on, Waddle had in 589 snaps last year almost as much receiving yardage as Chris Olave had in 787. And that's a Derek Carr, Dennis Allen, et cetera, kind of problem that's holding down Olave. But those guys are still there.
Yep. And, it's not like Carr is getting better necessarily at this stage of his career. Tresner also had a good one-liner. Christian McCaffrey. I like that. I'm going to steal
Taysom
that.
Hill will be the starting quarterback of the Saints by like November 15th.
Look, I said it last year. I've done the 360 on Taysom Hill. I liked him in college. I thought he was annoying for a while in the NFL. I love watching Taysom Hill play football, but that's mildly beside the point.
After the mutiny, it's going to be him. I'm not even kidding. It's not,
maybe
it'll be Rattler, but it'll probably be Hill.
It should be. He should be the player coach. He's old enough. I think he commands the respect of that locker room. He's like 70 years old. And I think he would wear a leather helmet if he was given the choice. So Waddle is the pick in this particular one. I personally have 15% Olave, 5% Waddle. I'll probably try to middle that here over the next little bit. I've probably just been drafting more HN, but in that particular range. But regardless, if you're in the market between these two, I think Waddle. Yeah, you bring up the good point.
Especially
in
best ball.
For best ball, yeah,
a little more injury risk, but I think significantly more upside because of the team that he's on.
All right, let's rock with a quarterback toss up. We got Jalen Hurts going at pick 41 on Underdog, and Josh Allen going at pick 37. Who do you like between these two? Because I think, we've drawn out a decent amount of analysis on this Bills offense and why there's a lot of reason for concern this year. But, Allen, put on his Superman cape last year and was, phenomenal for the most part. Loses Stephon Diggs, loses Gabe Davis, has a lot to replace there. But can he, just kind of overcome that on his own, or is Hurts the better pick at cost?
I have to issue a bit of a disclaimer in that I'm mostly uninvested in both Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts, so I haven't had to force myself to think about it as much as some other cases. But I am a little concerned about both players. I know there's a recent story from, I think ESPN had a recent story about how Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni were basically fighting all of last year, and we'll see, what comes of it. I don't know what ostensible reforms they made other than, firing Brian Johnson and hiring Kellen Moore. I don't know what they've changed exactly, but if those struggles of the Eagles in the second half of them last year are things they can fix with simple schematic adjustments, which is what some people are arguing. I don't know enough about the Eagles and the way they run their offense to know how true it is, but the stuff about them not having audibles in the playbook and how defenses were just, they knew every play they were running, stuff like that. Maybe, maybe not. I know that one thing they proposed was that Jalen Hurts suggested throwing more to the middle of the field and that would have been open and it would have basically fixed everything. But I don't think Jalen Hurts is good at throwing to that part of the field, so maybe it is true that they need to do it more, but I'm not convinced that it definitely just fixes everything. So that stuff creeps me out a little bit. However, one thing I don't have to worry about with Jalen Hurts is that A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert are all still on that field with him. And that offensive line, I know that the Bills' offensive line is being regarded more highly the last year or so than they were before that, but I'd still take the Eagles' offensive line between the two. And I think in Allen's case, it's just concerning that his price is basically as high as it's ever been, even though he's got the worst supporting cast since his rookie year. This is a big change, in my opinion. It's a paradigm shift to go from Stephon Diggs, John Brown, Gabe Davis era to just Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman, and apparently Mac Hollins, which never works out. People keep convincing themselves that he's epic and can block or whatever, but you tip off the play call by putting Hollins on the field, and he's not actually a deep threat. He's just bad at everything else, so you can't think of anything else for him to do other than run in a straight line. So when you see a team, it's not as bad, admittedly, as when they fixated on Trent Sherfield, of all players last year. Like, Hollins is better than him, but they don't have Stephon Diggs now. That's like a third of your targets. You can't just delete a third of your targets and say, oh, well, we'll put a committee together to patch this up. Like, no, you don't replace that player unless you have another player that good, and you don't. So even if Coleman has like a high range outcome his rookie year, even if Curtis Samuel stays healthy and has the best season he has in 4 or 5 years, even if Shakir does well in the slot and Kincaid has a huge year, I'm still not convinced that Allen has as much help now, and certainly not anywhere near as much help as he did in his peak season when they had Stephon Diggs, John Brown's deep speed, and Cole Beasley putting up big numbers in the slot. Like Kincaid might be the Beasley component. Samuel Shakir might be pretty good, but there's no Diggs. So for that reason, I kind of prefer Hurts.
Okay. And then, looking at both these guys, they both had tons of rushing touchdowns last year. In Hurts's case, maybe this is just dumb guy brain, but, a lot of them came on the tush push. Jason Kelsey's no longer there. Do you worry that the overall like bottom line for Hurts is like fantasy production as it pertains to the rushing scores? Like if that comes down, do you think that he can offset that with good enough passing numbers?
Maybe. I don't feel strongly enough about any of those possibilities to really act on them specifically. And also, if he goes from 15 rushing touchdowns to 7 or 8, that's still fine. It still might be enough to be quarterback 1. But between these two players and the respective concerns, that's why I, at the cheaper prices, find it very easy to go after Mahomes and Stroud types instead. But if Hurts bounces back from if they fix that offense from whatever is wrong in the second half, he should be rolling more or less. Allen, of course, will be productive either way, if only from his rushing production. But I've said it before, I expect Allen to throw 20 interceptions this year, and I don't think this is going to be one of his better years of his career.
No, unlikely. I think there's too much to reconfigure within that Buffalo offense. So I only have like one Allen share, and like I'm only going to draft Josh Allen if I know I'm going to draft Dalton Kincaid, and I don't like feeling like forced into a stack and starting it with the quarterback in the fourth round, that type of thing. So I'm lightly invested in these guys both, but at the same time, this is a toss-up that drafters are grappling with at this stage.
Pursue your stacks is what I would say there. I mean, if you're going for a certain one, go for it. But there's not a whole lot of reason to rank one much over the other at all.
And speaking of Dalton Kincaid, there's an interesting trio of tight ends that we're seeing forming as far as the ADP goes, where we've got Dalton Kincaid, we've got Mark Andrews, and we've got Trey McBride. So their ADPs, they're all going within 5 picks of each other. McBride, the first or the earliest of them at 46, Mark Andrews at 48.7, and Dalton Kincaid at 51. So between these three, who are you drafting and why?
I prefer McBride, but maybe I'd be quicker to consider Andrews if not for his injury history. I don't know. Kincaid, I like a lot more in full point PPR than I do half point PPR. He's definitely going to do better than 2 touchdowns on 73 catches this year, but Kincaid still, I think, might be liable to be a bit of a grinder tight end, catching like 90 passes for 912 yards and 4 or 5 touchdowns, which would be very successful in general for a tight end, and it would be very productive in PPR scoring in particular. But if you're getting, if you're getting 45 points for his reception count instead of 90, that I think will be a pretty easy way to see Kincaid slipping behind McBride, who in my opinion is just I think he's a better player, and I think he's in a better situation in that I think Kincaid is going to have to carry a lot of the burdens of dysfunction of the Bills offense. Like when they're not spaced properly because they don't have a good balance of route running personnel the way they used to. And when certain guys are getting tied up and no one's open and Allen has to extend a play and find someone to just, cannon the ball through 3 defenders in a tight window, Kincaid's going to be that guy, much like he already was last year in a lot of those cases. And he should be good at it. It's just, I don't know if they're going to close, other than by Josh Allen running. I don't know if they're going to close in the end zone the way they maybe are used to in the past, because defense has a lot more spare bandwidth now. I know it's something that's difficult to put in ways people can understand until they actually see it, but it's going to be a fundamentally different game without Diggs out there. So I'm expecting fewer touchdowns in Kincaid's case than I do in McBride's, and certainly in Andrews' case, because that's kind of Andrews' whole thing. He's so explosive by tight end standards, and particularly after last year, you're probably not expecting quite the target rate upside. But with Andrews, he's the guy who can give you 9 yards a target and a touchdown every 5 catches. So I guess I'd say Andrews has the highest upside, but I see McBride as kind of like the median option.
Yeah, this is a tricky one for me. I feel comfortable drafting all 3 of these guys at this ADP. Like I want to have a good amount of exposure to each of these 3. I definitely understand the case for like waiting and getting a Kyle Pitts a little bit later, or if you want,
I do like doing that.
Yes. So, or wait a decent bit longer and get like a Jake Ferguson. I do that a fair amount, but he's sort of like that last tight end that you feel good about going into this year as your tight end 1. But I think in McBride's case, we're going to see fewer targets, but like, compared to last year, because, Harrison's coming in and Michael Wilson, I think should have a larger role, but he's still an important part of this offense. And maybe it'll be like less empty calorie. Like, he's someone that can really produce for underdog and not just for PPR, full point PPR type scoring. And yeah, I mean, I think just where I land on Kincaid is essentially if somehow the Bills offense can get it going, despite all the changes and all the losses, I think that he is going to just be Josh Allen's go-to guy. And even if like the efficiency is a little bit ugly, I think that by hook or by crook, like Kincaid ultimately ends up returning it what you paid for. And then Andrews, I love Mark Andrews. So yeah, he's a big play threat of this trio. So, I mean, I fully endorse getting all 3 of these guys. If I were to handicap it, I mean, as far as my exposure goes, it is Kincaid actually first among these guys, Andrews, and then McBride. But I want to bump up my exposure to each of these 3.
Yeah, again, in Kincaid's case, he should get so many targets that he's the lead target on the Bills. The efficiency should be fine. Certainly the volume should be good. It's pretty much just the touchdown counts that I'm wondering about the tiebreaker. And but because McBride and Andrews have, really high projections themselves. So more practically though, I am probably just trying to get Pitts. It's just hard to get that. You gotta be in between a lot of tight end picks when you take Pitts, and sometimes someone's, ready to take him 4 picks earlier than you thought they were.
Exactly. You can go into that like 4th, 5th round and have that potential of getting any one of those 3 guys. Whereas if you wait a little bit, other guys might have that same idea and be targeting Pitts with that next pick. So, it is a little bit draft slot dependent as to when you can get Pitts. Before we move on to our next toss-up, we got a message from our friends over at Fantrax. Is there something you wish your fantasy league had, or features that are missing from your current leagues? Bonus scoring, custom schedules, or playoffs? Deeper team settings? Well, look no further, because we have you covered with our friends at Fantrax. Fantrax is the most customizable fantasy platform in the industry, offering the greatest fantasy experience for your dynasty, keeper, redraft, and best ball leagues. Fantrax even offers college fantasy football leagues. The RotoWire staff college fantasy league is ongoing right now. I think we're somewhere in the 3rd round. I got Darius Taylor from Minnesota with my first pick. He missed a decent amount last year, but he also got like 40 carries when he did play. So I'm just going to hope that he gets 12 games of 40 carries, and we'll kind of go from there. Create or join a fantasy football commissioner league. Invite your friends and dominate your draft this season. Fantrax is the top dynasty fantasy football platform in the industry. Coming from another service? Not a problem. Fantrax can easily import any of your current leagues and rosters. Ever have a trade go wrong or make a mistake in dropping a player? Fantrax commissioner tools allow you to undo any move with one simple click. Fantrax is running a special promotion that you do not want to miss. Sign up for free at fantrax.com/RotoWire today to enter for your chance to win tickets to any regular season NFL game for you and your entire league, plus $6,000 in spending cash. That's right, tickets for your entire league. Simply create a new league or bring over your existing leagues for more chances to win. Simply go to fantrax.com/RotoWire and sign up today. Fantrax, the home of fantasy sports. We also got a message from our friends over at ACME Real Fantasy Football. What's the fantasy football scores looking like an NBA All-Star game? Let's get real with ACME Real Fantasy Football. The top teams average around 28 points a game. This is how ACME Real Fantasy Football scoring system is based. The system is also very accurate compared to the actual game score. Each team drafts only 9 players filling the primary positions. Benches are used only for injured players and bye week players. This leaves 200 free agents available to improve your team. Weekly waivers give preference to the bottom of the league standings, and league rankings are always changing, keeping it competitive throughout the entire season. ACME Real Fantasy Football also has a one-of-a-kind playoff format, selecting a new lineup each week. All teams are competing from week 1 through the Super Bowl. 12-team leagues start today at only $120. Go to acmerealfantasyfootball.com and sign up today. All right, onward. We've got a few more toss-ups to hit on this here podcast. Let's go to the running backs a little bit later on, but I feel like this is a pocket of the best ball market in particular where I'm oftentimes shopping for my running backs. And frankly, I'm mostly drafting James Conner here, but I'm having some FOMO about my relative lack of Rhamondre Stevenson. But I did notice from our latest ADP report that he's going a little bit behind one Aaron Jones. So between those two guys, why can you imagine the reasoning why Aaron Jones is going at pick 80, whereas Rhamondre going around pick 83? And who do you like between these two?
I prefer Rhamondre pretty easily, as well as some other running backs going around or later than Aaron Jones does. And it's painful for me to say that because I've been a fan of Aaron Jones for a long time. Was, among the original truthers who the second the Packers took him in the 5th round out of UTEP, we said he's better than Jamal Williams, who they had taken in the 4th round out of BYU in the same draft. And it's been a lot of fun watching Aaron Jones in Green Bay, where he's been awesome. And yeah, he's an awesome player. However, Aaron Jones is turning 30 in December, and he's had a pretty big workload over his career. Not so heavy on a weekly basis in the NFL, but he's been in the league since 2017, and he took a huge workload at UTEP. So the idea of Jones playing until he's like 34 or something, that doesn't seem very likely to me. And if there is a closing window sometime in the next year or two, it could very easily happen in the next year, is how I see it. And Jones has never been especially durable in the NFL. So when you take him from the Packers, where under LaFleur especially, they ran that offense pretty well. They had their lower points than others, of course, but that offense was well designed and well, tended to by LaFleur the whole time. I personally am not sold on Kevin O'Connell. I think he might be okay in the way that a Kevin Stefanski is an okay coach, and the way that they're not quite as bad as some other people. But, I just don't think O'Connell is much more than a button masher. I don't think he has really an idea of what he's doing other than kind of riding vibes from moment to moment. And there's something to him as a coach. I mean, his players seem to like playing for him. He seems to have everybody motivated. I'm sure he's not as dim as some other coaches out there, but that Vikings team sucks, in my opinion. That roster is crap. And I think they already weren't very good last year. And now I just think they're quite a bit worse, is as simple as I see it. So catching Jones at the worst part of his career trajectory on this team that, in my opinion, is kind of just tail spinning right now. It's not that I worry about Jones checking out or anything, but I worry about the Vikings, instead of having scenarios where they're getting Jones regularly to 15 plus carries, they're instead getting him to 8 or 9, and then they have to start throwing the ball, and they're throwing the ball 38, 40 times a game. Jones might do something as a pass catcher, but it's not really a strength. He's just kind of an all-purpose playmaker, and you can't actually rely on Jones that much for things like catch rate. He kind of needs... He's not like a grinder, even though he makes big plays so reliably. It's just like he needs the big play availability. I don't think that many players in this Vikings offense are going to make big plays. And I think in the case of DeAndre Swift, who I think goes later, in the case certainly of Rhamondre Stevenson, I understand why people would look at the Patriots and assume like, oh, they suck. They're going to be losing all the time.
Right.
They very well could be, but they're going to run the ball no matter what. Much like the Raiders are going to run with Zamir White no matter what. That's just their budgeting plan this year. And it doesn't matter if they're losing. That they are expected to lose is precisely why they're doing this. They're trying to make games shorter. They're trying to keep their defense more rested than the other defense. They're trying to keep their field positioning more favorable than the other team. And they don't care if they basically forfeit the chance at being an above average passing offense. It's not interesting to them. They're going for something else. Stevenson will get the ball about 20 times every game that he's healthy. And I think that's just open and shut, no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge factor. I mean, it is interesting, just like both these offenses are bad, both these teams are pretty bad, but in different ways that can either help or hurt the
Patriots defense is production.
Mm-hmm.
The Vikings defense is bad.
It is bad. So like, yeah, they're going to be like the Vikings could be like trailing by a lot very often, and therefore they're going to throw it. And like the strength of that offense generally is Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. No matter what, it's Sam Darnold or JJ McCarthy back there at quarterback. They are going to be throwing it a ton. And I just don't really envision Jones having this huge year. Whereas Stevenson, I think, is kind of like the way to kind of protect Drake May as he gets developed to the NFL. So I prefer Stevenson. I think that he's one of the stronger picks from that particular bucket of running backs as well. So I think the market has it slightly wrong as far as having Jones just a bit ahead of Rhamondre. Let's grab two more quickly before we head out. Let's grab David Njoku or Brock Bowers. What do you think?
I love both players. I love Njoku. I think he's the real deal. I don't think he's a flash in the pan. What he did last year is really who he always was this whole time. However, I do worry about Deshaun Watson having a pop gun, wiffle ball type arm at this point, and I don't know what that means exactly for for what Njoku's looking at. I know he did some good games with bad quarterbacks last year, but and of course, no matter what, the Raiders will have a crap quarterback. But the difference to me is I think the Raiders have to give the ball to Brock Bowers, whereas I think Cleveland wants to get the ball to Njoku, but they're going to start with some other basics first. And if they have to strip down the passing game, it would sooner be Njoku than Cooper and even Jerry Jeudy. And Jerry Judy's going to hurt Njoku's target share. So that stuff is a concern for me. Whereas with Bowers, I think if it comes down to it, Tom Telesco will say, like, get him 10 targets or you're going to be fired. I'm Tom Telesco, the GM.
So I was talking to our guy Nick Whalen yesterday, and we were talking about some later round receivers, and he was saying that he has a decent amount of Jacoby Myers, and I posited that it could be a different look to this Raiders offense because they did spend such an early pick on Brock Bowers. I think that Devontae Adams, his target share is not up for debate, but I was expressing a bit of concern as to, if you're investing in Jacoby Myers, if, some of those targets that were going his way suddenly go to the rookies.
I'm really low on Jacoby, so that's how I am trying to make the math work. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So he's the one. And I think that's a good point on Jeudy and his addition to this Browns offense. And then I don't think I'm going to land on a firm answer when it comes to my Deshaun Watson expectations before the season starts.
I'm out. Maybe he becomes like a 15 pass per game running quarterback, but that arm really looks shot. Yeah, couldn't happen to a better guy, I guess.
And then let's grab two rookie running backs here that are of interest: Blake Corum and Trey Benson. I think both of them are worthy of being picked where they are. We got Benson going at pick 119. And we've got Corum going just a bit after him at pick 121. If you're looking for a running back, you're picking right there. Both these guys are on the board. Who's your pick?
I almost had to make this call in my NFFC best ball draft, but Corum went 3 picks before I was up. I took Benson happily. That might have been influenced by having Connor earlier, so I'm in theory kind of tying up the Arizona backfield. But I think Corum, if Kyren Williams God forbid, miss time, Corum has the higher ceiling of the two because Corum can just basically immediately become this year what Kyren Williams was to the Rams offense last year. I think the likely outcome is Kyren Williams gets like 35 snaps to Corum's 25 snaps, at least come November or something like that. And I think they're kind of content to let Corum keep Kyren healthy up to that point. But with Benson, I don't think they're going to try to get Benson on the field as much with the Cardinals. But I do think they're looking forward to the times they do get him out there because he could be a home run hitting specialist off the bench after James Conner. And if James Conner, God forbid, miss any time, then yeah, you're going to see, unfortunately, probably DeMercado play like 20 passing down snaps, even though he's awful. Either him or Michael Carter. But Benson, even if he's raw and blitz pickup, you got to get that guy on the field, especially if James Conner isn't available, because you just give him the ball and it goes. He's big and he's fast. He runs away from people. He runs over people. Give him the ball. So I do think Benson has a really high ceiling. It's just in the case of Corum, it's like, how do you beat 50, 60 snaps in a McVay offense? At least if Stafford's healthy, you can't really beat that.
Yeah, no, exactly. So
I prefer Corum is the answer because I think he has a slightly higher ceiling.
Yeah, and I think the guy in front of him is worse than what Trey Benson is competing against in Connor. So for transparency, I have more shares of Corum, but I have more entry fees tied to Benson, and their exposure is pretty similar in my portfolio.
That's probably smart. That's hedging or something like that.
Yeah, I totally meant to do that. But that's my lay of the land. I like both of them. I totally advise grabbing either of these guys if you're looking for a running back at the end of the 10th, beginning of the 11th round. But my slight lean monetarily is Benson. Money talks. So I guess that's my answer. But either way, I think you're going to be all right with either of these guys. That's going to round it out for us on this edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. A big thanks to our sponsors over at ACME, Real Fantasy Football over at Circa, and over at Fantrax. Also, if you are listening to us live, please go ahead and like and subscribe to the RotoWire YouTube channel and the RotoWire Football YouTube channel. We got some interesting stuff brewing on both of those channels for all season long, and on the main RotoWire YouTube channel, we got tons of different sports as well. So definitely worth subscribing. For Mario Puig, I'm John McKechnie. Thanks for listening.